Katie and Jacob are going to deliver. We then have a slot for Ashley Tinlin Mackenzie from Groundworks, going to be talking to us about the Oyster Reef project. We have Matt and Katie from DEFRA, who are going to talk to us about grant funding and fleet modernisation. I think that was following up from a question that we had at the last RFG regarding funding streams. So hopefully they'll be able to address some of those questions. Sean Douglas was going to speak to us about inshore vessel monitoring system, and Mark Southerton from Northumberland IFCA and Sarah Coulthard are going to do a quick update on the Northumberland Fisher forums and how they've been going. We did want to canvass industry opinion on these groups and what was the best format going forward. We're probably going to do that in any other business, but if we haven't got a great attendance from industry, we might better postponing that one or doing it via email or something. So just a couple of updates from issues that were raised in the last quarterly meeting. So there was a question raised regarding potential grant funding and why engine replacements didn't come under any grant streams for trawl vessels in particular. So like I mentioned, that's why we have Matt and Kate here. We've invited them along to discuss those various funding streams. We also had a bit of a trend and a theme from the last meeting that the inshore fleet wanted the opportunity to speak directly with the Minister. We did host a national meeting back in March. Thank you to all those who attended and participated. There's quite a lot of actions came out of that, and we're still working through those. I do have one final point before we come to Katie on quota. And it's a point from Lex Palmer, who works for the MMO. She's a service manager, and it's in relation to the under 10 metre catch recording system. So they're looking for volunteers, fishers ideally, to put together a focus group to feedback thoughts, opinions and ideas around the Record Your Catch service. So the group will share insights into what they're up to regarding catch recording and show what they're working on in advance of any deployment. So it's like a, like it says, a focus group basically. Not a massive time commitment. Says sometimes they may ask participants to test some items out. These will be in the form of digital calls and take place once every 3 months. All calls will be recorded. So if we have anybody who would be interested in taking part in that group or sitting in that group, like I say, the time input should be minimal. Can volunteers please contact Callie McIntosh and the RFG team just to show their interest in getting involved with that. Okay. So, oh, Joe, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, regarding the catch thing, could maybe Kaylee email me some information? I can send it round to all the vessels in the harbour, see if I can drum up some volunteers for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can do that, Joe. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Katie, you're up next, so I'll hand over to you for the usual quota section.
Thanks, Pat. So hi everyone. For anyone who hasn't seen me before, my name is Katie James and I'm the inshore quota manager. There has been a recent change in my job and I have a new job share. So I just want to introduce everyone to Jacob Bestwick, who's my now other half. Do you want to give us a wave and say hi, Jacob? Just some thinking for the sake of the recording. Anyone who will see it will at least see your face and know who to ask and not ask me anymore.
Yeah, hello, I'm Jacob, and like Katie said, I'm also now one of the inshore quota managers.
So in future, it may be me presenting quota, it may be Jacob. We'll probably take turns depending on who's on leave, who's around availability wise. But we intend to keep the format the same for the presentations. So what I do, if you just give me 2 seconds, I'll share my screen and I'll just give a little update on quota and where things stand at the moment. Cool. Can everyone see that? Oh, Joe, have you got your hand up again, or is that a previous hand? I'm not sure.
Mine's not showing us up.
Oh, maybe it's just a delay on my end, sorry. Okay, cool. So just to sort of repeat the layout of these so that everyone's aware if no one's seen them before, and also for those who may watch a recording later. The left-hand graph is the yearly uptake. So the blue line gives you the initial availability for the year from our allocation from the Secretary of State determination. The orange line is then the total available. So if that stock has, myself or Jacob have traded that stock out or traded it in, depending on whether we need it or whether it's available to be traded out to be used by the parties, is the orange line. The grey line is then how much has actually been landed by the vessels, so the total used. And then we've just got a yellow trend line which follows there through. The right-hand graph is the monthly uptake by year. So all these graphs now show 2020, 21, 22, and where we're at for 23. And the right-hand graph, the bars start at the bottom at January in the blue, and the top bar is December in green. So it shows you right through for the months. It gives us an idea of any trends or seasonalities that we might be seeing, or any changes in stocks as the years pass through, basically. All of these graphs are just for the under 10 metre fleet. However, there is a box in the bottom right hand corner, which is the over 10 metre fleet. Something just to mention was we were recently approached by some fishermen who were looking at other opportunities for fishing, didn't really understand quota and how it worked. They see these graphs all the time. They don't mean very much to them, unfortunately, because they weren't targeting quota species. But we did do like a one-on-one session with a few fishers where we actually went through, explained about various licenses, quotas, that sort of thing. So if there's ever anything like that from industry who want any sort of more information on quota, please don't hesitate to get in touch with Callie, and they can sort of put you in touch with us, or directly with myself or Jacob, and our phone numbers and email shared mailboxes on the last slide, which will be available for everyone to see. Okay, so just going back, so North Sea anglerfish, we've got an under 10 metre allocation of 33.7 tonnes. The catch limit hasn't changed for this year, it's still sitting at 0.8 tonnes, and we've seen a relatively low uptake at 2.36 tonnes. And looking at previous year's trends, it doesn't look like we'll need to really trade any in. Similar sort of thing for over 10 metre fleet as well, with the 6.84 tonne allocation. Catch limit sits slightly low at 0.6, but there is lower uptake overall at 0.82 tonnes. North Sea mackerel, the negotiations for mackerels are still ongoing at the moment, so I don't have any definitive figures as to what exactly we have. We saw from Brexit that we received an allocation for the first time where we had 10.6 tonnes in 2021 of North Sea mackerel. What that looks like this year yet, not overly sure. I'm estimating it to be at 12.7, but once the negotiations have completed and we get the figures, I will update that information. But we haven't seen a huge amount of uptake. I have traded in quite a lot in previous years in a hope to inspire someone to look at a fishery. I know there was some issue over sizes of mackerel and things that it wasn't a sort of, they weren't able to catch what they needed to in order to be able to make use of the quota that we'd brought into the fleet via trading. If that changes though, or there is a wish for more, it is on my trading list for wanting it as a stock in, so that at least we have a substantial amount should there be an opportunity for someone to make to be able to catch some North Sea mackerel. The catch limit sits at 1.5 tonne as a sort of predicted amount based on the fact that we will get a fairly low allocation, but that will be manoeuvrable once we've traded some in. As I say, uptake is very low as well. North Sea nephrops, we've got an under 10 metre allocation of 487.25 tonnes. We've got a quarterly catch limit at the moment of 50 tonnes, and the current uptake is 200.73 tonnes. So we've done really well, similar to last year. We're looking probably on a similar scale, if not a bit more, to catch probably somewhere in the region of around 600 tonnes, depending on what the winter period looks like for North Sea nephrops. I mean, you look at that and we're probably nearly at 50% uptake. So that is a stock that we do receive in through trades and also through the economic link as well. So that will increase. It's just that trades and economic link have only just started happening at the moment. So probably the next round of RFGs, when we do another presentation or quota slides, you will see an increase of the availability for the winter months. And again, for the over 10 metre fleet, allocation has already been exceeded with the current uptake of 48 tonnes compared to 36 tonnes. So again, we'll look to trade in some there as well, just so we make sure we support the fleets throughout this year, right through into the winter months at the end of the year. But it's not stock we have a trouble getting hold of, so it's more than readily available. We've had several offers so far with trades and Economic Link to bring it in, so we'll certainly be able to support the fleet throughout. North Sea sole, we've seen a drop in allocation this year. However, that sort of reflects slightly better in terms of the fact that we don't see huge uptake, and obviously we've had issues in the past about North Sea sole, but allocation still sits at 482 tonnes. The catch limit sits at 5 tonnes at the moment. We did see last year it was slightly lower than the year before, sort of around the 114 dropped to 105, but still a similar amount, which is an improvement on 2020 when we had COVID hit. We haven't seen a huge amount of uptake this year, but looking at this, I mean, it's sort of summer months that you see the bigger uptake, so maybe we'll see some uptake. I know the last couple of years I've had a few people reach out asking for higher catch limits where they've seen sort of good amounts of North Sea sole over summer months in certain areas, so hopefully that will increase as the year goes on. And the catch limit sits at 6 tonnes for the over 10. Again, a good allocation of 136, so won't be looking to trade anything in there. I'm sure we've got enough to support the fleet. Whiting for North Sea, so we've got allocation of 254.99 tonnes, catch limit 4 tonnes, and the current uptake is 10 tonnes. Seen a bit of a nosedive last year, the whiting for North Sea. I mean, 2020 and 21 looked at 45 tonnes, and we dropped right down to sort of 28 tonnes last year. I mean, if anyone is watching this recording at future dates, or anyone knows now, just interested in any feedback as to why, maybe if they know why maybe whiting's taken a bit of a nosedive, just any kind of information, or whether it's a particular fishery. So yeah, just interested in any feedback there really for whiting. North Sea skates and rays, we've got an allocation of 94.41 tonnes for the under 10 metres. We've got a catch limit sitting at 4.5 tonnes at the moment, and we've got a current uptake of 41.3 tonnes. So again, we're almost at sort of the 50% mark in terms of uptake. However, again, this is a stock that we receive in via trading and Economic Link. I've just completed a cross-year trade this morning, which traded an additional 50 tonnes. That should support you guys easily in terms of North Sea skates and rays. I do use some of the North Sea skates and rays to support the 7D fleet as well in terms of flex stocks, due to flexibility of being able to attribute landings across the areas, but we'll have some additional stock that comes in to support that as well. So we will see an increase in that through later in the year when I've moved some of the 7D landings into the North Sea skates and rays. Over 10, again, I've got a good allocation of 19.44, uptakes 1.39. Again, what we've got trading in will more than enough support the fleet throughout. North Sea cod, as an overall this is, so we've got an allocation of 402 tonnes for this year, which is a big jump again from last year. We did see a spike last year, I have to say. Kind of gave me a bit of a scare in November, December, when all of a sudden there was a peak in catching of North Sea cod, which had gone down in previous years. So I'm very aware that, obviously we're not going to trade it all out. We do want to hold on to some to support the fleet, whatever. But we have got a whopping amount this year compared to what we've had in the last couple of years. So the catch limits sit at 4 tonne and 3 tonne for the over 10 fleet. We did see, I mean, just looking at 2023, you can see January and February alone obviously way outdo anything that we've had in the last couple of years in terms of catch amount. So definitely seems to be an improvement in terms of the amount of North Sea cod that's about. And as you'll see last year, October and November, as I said, there was quite a big spike where we jumped from 20 tonnes to almost 50 tonnes and doubled within the sake of a couple of months. But that's really good to see. I've had a few conversations with fishers, and it sounds really positive when it comes to North Sea cod. They were talking about having seen codlings early on, and it kind of gave a good positive approach for cod later in the year. But again, if that's something that people see around, I know it's not so much in the summer months, but maybe when it comes to winter, if the catch limits aren't enough, then please just give myself or Jacob a shout. We're happy to discuss and look what we can do to increase it. The quote is certainly there, so we're happy to accommodate and be able to look at what opportunities we can maximise. Just to break it down so that you guys can see for 4B specifically, you can obviously see here the majority of it is taken in 4B, so it's you guys that are seeing the cod. It's not necessarily 4C, it is 4B that are seeing the extra cod from what I can see on our graphs and our figures and uptake. So yeah, it's just really good to point out and show that it's you guys that are seeing it, and really reach out and say, if you do need anything, let us know. That's everything from me. My phone number, Jacob's phone number, and our shared mailbox email is there. Doesn't matter how you want to contact us. I don't care whether you don't want to talk to me and you just want to leave me a voicemail or a text message. I'm happy, and Jacob's happy either way, to chat whatever's easiest to suit people. And there's just some useful links if anyone needs at the end, links to the catch limits so they can see them, and any of our trading stats that we've done as well. And then we do issue a catch limit consultation once a month as well. Goes out between the 15th and the 18th generally. It goes live to show what catch limits we're looking at altering for the month ahead. So you'll see at the end of next week, we'll be issuing a catch limit consultation. I keep saying catch limit review. It's not a consultation, sorry. Change of terminology. Catch limit review for the June catch limit. So if anyone's got any input when they see that go live, then please let us know and feed in if there's anything that you want changing. Thank you. I'll hand back to you, Pat, unless there's any questions.
Thanks, Katie. Just a reminder for everybody, if anyone's dialed in before I had the chance to say, we are recording this just for your information. So we've got pretty poor attendance from industry today. I suspect it's probably a good fishing day, but we are recording it and we'll circulate around our usual attendees. So yeah, just for your information, really. Next on the agenda, we have Ashley Tinlin-McKenzie from Groundwork going to speak to us about the Oyster Reef project, hopefully.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having us. I've got a couple of colleagues on the call as well, Celine from ZSL and Matt from Blue Marine. So hopefully if there's any questions between us, we can answer those for you. Okay, I'll just share my screen now for my presentation. Okay, can you see that all right?
Yeah, we can see that.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so I'm Ashley and I work for Groundwork in Northeastern Cumbria, and I'm basically here today to tell you a bit about our oyster reef restoration project here in the Northeast, and how we're currently going out as a fisheries consultation just to let all the fishing industry know about our plans for this summer. So some of you might have seen this poster out and about. So if you're in the kind of Sunderland, North Shields area, we've put it up in the marinas and the fish quays just to kind of get the message out there. And then hopefully today we'll reach a few extra people as well. So the Wild Oysters project, just a bit of a background so you understand where we're coming from and our kind of rationale. I've just realised that's in the way. Let me get rid of that. So we've got 3 national partners. That's Zoological Society of London, Blue Marine and British Marine. And our project's funded by the People's Postcode Lottery and some new funding just coming in from South Tyneside Council on the new Stronger Shores project. So we've got a Wales site and a Tyne and Weir site. So I'm based in the Tyne and Weir site, and that hub is delivered by Groundwork Northeastern Cumbria, who I work for. So a little bit of background on native oysters, if you're not familiar with them. They are sessile bivalve mollusks, so they essentially don't move. Once they're settled on the seabed, they cement themselves in place and they'll stay in that one location for the whole of their lives. Native oysters are just one of 30 oyster species globally, and the UK has stock of native oysters and Pacific oysters, but it's the native oysters that we're really interested in on this project. They're the original ones that we're naturally here on our coasts many years ago. So one of the key benefits of oysters is how they create these oyster reefs. So oysters don't just live 1 or 2, they tend to aggregate into these really large reef systems, and they create these complex 3D structures like you can see in some of these images. They stick onto each other, cement onto each other, and they can grow quite tall. And that's what gives them their name as ecosystem engineers. And through this, they create habitats. So they create habitats for lots of different species, and they can really boost biodiversity because they create an area that is different to the surrounding seabed. And these are just some of the advantages of oyster reefs. So I've touched there on biodiversity enhancement. So by forming these complex structures, they're creating shelter and food for a diversity of species. And this does include fish species. So they provide a suitable feeding and nursery ground for fish, which can in turn increase fish production. Another major impact from oyster reefs and a benefit is that they filter water. So oysters actually filter up to 200 litres of seawater a day per oyster. So you can imagine on the scale of a reef, millions of oysters, how much that can affect the local water quality. So they can impact water clarity as well as water quality, which is really important. And to touch on the native oyster status, so unfortunately there's been a huge decline over the last 2 centuries of native oyster reefs, 85% global decline, 95% in Europe. They're now categorised as a nationally scarce habitat, and they're pretty much on the path to extinction if we don't act to restore them. And there's 2 major barriers to this recovery. There's firstly the lack of broodstock, so the lack of adult oysters already in our marine systems to go on and produce future generations. And then there's also the lack of habitat. So oysters are quite picky with their habitat. They like to live on sort of hard ground made of shell. They like a calcium carbonate source. That's what they're attracted to before they settle. So we don't really have much of this left. So that's an issue as well. In terms of coming more local into the Tyne and Wear, we know that they were once common in Britain. We don't have a lot of historic data for locally in Tyne and Wear, but we do have this information to show that they probably were here in large numbers in the 1800s. So you can see on the right-hand side, there's a map there, and this was produced from reports from fishermen in 1883, which shows everywhere kind of in the orange section is oyster reefs. And you can just see there's a nice thin line along the whole of the northeast coast, really, of orange there, signifying that there was once oyster reefs here. More evidence is in the form of some cultural references. So there was a building on Oyster Shell Road in Newcastle, and the road's still called Oyster Shell Road, but the building's long gone, and it was called Oyster Shell Hall, and the entire building was rendered in oyster shells. So that hints that there was a little bit of an excess of oyster shells in the area. There was also an oyster saloon registered in Tynemouth in 1865, specialising in selling oysters for the locals to eat. And then there's also a reference to Oyster Wife's Petition, the name of a song in a Geordie dialogue book from the 1840s. So we do think it was part of our culture and part of our history here in the Northeast as well. And so we want to go and restore oysters. There's lots of benefits to it, and we think we should bring them back here to the northeast coast as well. So we're looking at a 3-pronged approach. Firstly, we've got oyster nurseries, which are essentially broodstock, so lots of adult oysters in these cage systems that you can see on the left there. And these essentially provide the broodstock. So they breed in these cages and they pump out the oyster larvae into the wild. So we've got them in Sunderland Marina and the Port of Blyth currently. And then we also do an outreach programme, run events, education, engage with local schools and have volunteers. But the main thing that we want to touch on today is the middle of the seabird restoration, because this is what we're consulting on now. And this involves creating a preferred habitat so that reefs can form in our area. So to go about this, we started with a site selection model, a spatial model to select the best sites that we think that oysters would thrive in along our coast. So we wanted to target areas that were shallow, that had mixed sediment or close to mixed sediment, low currents so that the oysters could feed, and also be reached by our oyster larvae, which are in Sunderland and Blyth from those broodstock cages. We also wanted to avoid marine protected areas for licensing issues. We wanted to avoid key fishing areas, which is where this consultation comes in. So we've tried to avoid popular fishing spots as much as possible. We also wanted to avoid spoil disposal areas so the oysters didn't get smothered, and also shipwreck sites which might be protected. A lot of work went into our fisheries avoidance. In these models, we tried to look at VMS data, a little bit of talk about IVMS data. We looked at IFCA sightings, patrol sightings from 2016 to now. And then we also had anecdotal information from locals speaking to people around the marinas and fish quays and trying to get an idea of where locals tend to target. So we went on to then, so you can see Sunderland really on this map, that the darker the area, the more suitable the model felt it was. So you can see there's a real hotspot around Sunderland there, and that's what we've kind of honed in on our site selection. So we ended up picking a smaller area in here around the coast of Whitburn, and we carried out some habitat surveys to really define that site selection and choose a small area for the reef, which will be 100 metres by 75 metres. There's 2 of these sites. One we hope to create this year in 2023, the pink box that you can see on the map there, and one in 2024. So we're hoping to work on that pink one in August this year. And I just wanted to highlight here at this stage that it will not exclude fishing. There'll be no rules excluding fishing from the areas, and there'll be nothing letting people continue their current activities at all. So reef deployment plans, we are adding culture to the seabed in August. So culture is the material that the oysters like to live on. So that is a combination of gravel and shells, and we're going with limestone aggregate and scallop shells, about 800 tonnes total. And we'll be adding this to the seabed in that first location, 100 metres by 75 metres in August of 2023. The vessels that we're using to deploy, so we're probably going to be using like a big dredging vessel to add the shells to the seabed, and these will be in the area there for a few days to weeks, maximum probably 2 weeks, so not too long. And we definitely will release a notice to mariners around this time just to warn people what's happening in the area and give you more information once we know exact dates. But yeah, that's basically what we're planning to do, just hoping that if any fishermen, fishing communities have any questions, then they can feel free to get in touch. This email address will get you directly to us as well. If you think of anything at a later date or anyone wants to get in touch after seeing the recording, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. Do we have any questions for Ashley? Okay, well, your details are on the slide there, Ashley, so I'm sure if I send the recording out, there's anything, they'll chase you up by email or anything else. So yeah, thanks for that, and thanks for coming to talk to us today. It was really interesting.
Oh, thanks for having us. Thank you. See you later.
Okay, so next we have grant funding and fleet modernisation. So Matt and Kate from DEFRA.
Thanks, Patrick. Afternoon everybody. Yeah, so my name's Matt. I'm from the Fisheries funding team in DEFRA. Kate, I'm sure will come on and introduce herself in a second, but yeah, thank you for the invite today and the opportunity just to come and give you guys a brief update on where we are with the funding. So in a second, we're going to share some slides. I think, Callie, you're going to share the slides on screen in a second, if that's still okay. And so we're going to recap over the available funding schemes, how much we've committed through each of the schemes so far, and also provide an update of the open opportunities to industry as well. So I'll let Kate say hello first before we go over the slides. Kate, if you'd like to come on.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, I'm also a policy advisor in the Fisheries funding team, but specifically on the kind of skills and training element of the UK Seafood Fund. Thanks, Matt.
No worries, thanks, Kate. Kelly, you still okay to share? Oh, brilliant, thank you.
Yeah, can you see that?
Yeah, I got it, thanks. Can we just go straight to the first one?
Yep.
Brilliant, thanks, Callie. So just like I said before, I'm just going to do a really quick recap on the available funding schemes in England. So the first one on screen there is the FARS, which I'm sure everybody's probably aware of. So the Fisheries and Seafood Scheme, which is essentially England's domestic scheme. It opened a couple of years ago now, so in April 2021. It's funded via repatriated funding, which is provided by the UK government ever since our exit from the EU. Just under £33 million is split annually to each of the 4 UK fishing administrations, and at least £6 million of that is made available through grants in England through the FARS scheme. The scheme aims to deliver investments that will safeguard the long-term sustainability, resilience and prosperity of the seafood sector across England. So we'll talk a little bit more about FARs in a couple of slides time, but if we can just go on to the next one, please, Callie. Thank you. In addition to FARs, so there is we've also got the UK Seafood Fund, which was announced in late 2020. So that was following the conclusion of the trade and cooperation agreement with the EU, and essentially provides a further £100 million to the fishing and seafood industry across the UK until 2025. The fund was set up to support the long-term future and sustainability of the fisheries and seafood sector as a whole across the UK. Some of the main objectives of the UK Seafood Fund are to reform and modernise infrastructure, to level up and bring economic growth to coastal communities, enable an environmentally sustainable fishing industry which gives most value for money and also reflects the long-term needs of the sector as well. It's split three ways, as you can see. So with the overall budget, we've got £65 million going towards big infrastructure projects that will increase the capacity and capability across the supply chain in places such as ports and processing hubs, aquaculture facilities, things like that. We're also using some of that £65 million to further help the wild catching sector with support for fleet modernisation, which we'll come on to in a minute. And there's also a funding round for the recreational sea fishing sector as well. £24 million available to science and innovation, which is split between the two funds there. So the Seafood Innovation Fund, which started in 2019 and became a part of the UK Seafood Fund 2 years later. We've also got the Fisheries Industry Science Partnerships FIS scheme as well, which is funded through that. Between both schemes, they fund the development of innovative new technologies and ideas and support collaborative research. £10 million to develop new and improve current courses to attract new entrants and upskill existing workers through skills and training. And finally, we're also investing £1 million, providing £1 million to allow fishers and seafood businesses to boost access to new markets and take advantage of new opportunities abroad now that we're outside of the EU. So that's the UK Seafood Fund. Next slide, please, Callie. Excuse me. So just an update here as to how much funding we've committed through both schemes so far. So starting with FARS, so as you can see, we've supported a high number of projects over the last couple of years, so over 750 projects, which is quite a big amount, and we've spent well over £13 million in the process as well. The great thing about that is that the vast majority of the funding is going to micro entities, small businesses, sole traders. So we'd like to think that funding is really hitting the ground level, which is important. So over £13 million spent across FARS so far over the last couple of years. UK Seafood Fund, so we've committed nearly half of the total budget so far. So we've committed the budget to some big infrastructure projects, seven skills and training projects, and over 100 science and innovation projects as well. What we plan to do is we plan to commit most of the remaining budget over the coming months. So we've nearly committed half of the overall budget. The remaining budget should be committed over the coming months and into next year. The reason why we've included the links, some links on the slide here, is I understand that the slides will be cascaded following the meeting. So if anybody is interested to find out more about the projects that we're funding, then you'll be able to click through the links and read all about the different types of projects there. So please do that if you are interested. Next slide, please, Callie, if that's all right. Thank you. So available funding opportunities, opportunities that are still open for industry. So starting with FARS. So FARS is actually a rolling opportunity, which essentially remains open for applications throughout the year. It aims to support small local projects for either individual or multiple businesses, and it can provide a maximum contribution to a project of £250,000 as well. So There probably are far too many different types of projects for me to mention that would be eligible under FARS. However, the team would like to promote the fact that higher rates of support are being given for community and cooperative projects, and that we will also fund projects that improve the marine environment as well. What we would always advise is if anybody does have an idea for funding, if you click through the link which is on the slide there, you can actually access the expression of interest form. So we would always advise anybody to submit an expression of interest if you do have an idea, to find out if it is going to be eligible before applying. So you can do that through the relevant link on the slide there. For the UK Seafood Fund, it works a little bit differently to FARS in that the fund is delivered through different funding rounds with deadlines for applications across the schemes. So as it stands, we've currently got three schemes which are currently and still open for funding. So there's the second skills and training round is still open. That is due to close on the 19th of May, which, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's the end of next week. Applicants can apply for a maximum £3 million for projects that would improve the quality and accessibility of training facilities for the sector. We also have a small £1 million funding round, which is open for the recreational sea fishing sector as well. So that's set to close on the 19th of June. We'll fund any recreational projects worth up to £100,000. If eligible, and projects that are looking to develop and improve infrastructure and promote sustainable growth are encouraged. And then last but not least, there is the funding round. Funding round is now open to help modernise the small-scale coastal fleet replacement engines. So what we've essentially done is we've made an initial £2 million available until the 31st of October, or until the money runs out, whichever comes first. And essentially, this is acting as a trial, a pilot, to gather evidence to inform future funding opportunities. What we're currently doing with this is we're providing up to £40,000 for a new electric or hybrid engine, or up to £20,000 for a new and more efficient diesel or petrol engine. So again, this is just a trial. This is just a pilot. This scheme overall, we will be investing £10 million towards fleet modernisation overall. So we've only made the initial £2 million available for this particular pilot. The further £8 million will be made available following this trial. And essentially, what we'll do at the end of the trial is we'll understand how successful the round has been. I guess understand how evaluate how successful the round has been, understand whether we make a decision as to whether we reopen the round, extend the eligibility, or make a decision as to whether we need to target the funding in a different area. But a further £8 million will be made available through that scheme later in the year. And as with all the funding opportunities, you can find out more information and check the eligibility through the links on the slide as well, which again will be cascaded following this. Next slide, please, Callie. And finally, we just wanted to share just a really rough timeline with everybody. So as you can see, we plan to announce the awards from our final science and innovation rounds very soon. Further infrastructure and skills and training announcements, big announcements are planned for the summer. And towards the back end of the year, we'll be announcing the successful recreational projects and closing the current fleet modernisation round as well. So just a current timeline to share there with everybody. So thank you for listening. That's everything from the slide perspective. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to shout up. If we haven't got the answers to the questions, we will endeavour to go away and come back to you with the answers, but we'll do our best to answer any questions that anybody may have. I think one of the Patrick, you mentioned before, one of the main questions that people had at the start of the meeting was why we're not making engine replacement funding available to trawlers currently. So I don't know if I've answered that going through the slides, but just to reiterate that the fleet modernisation round is just a pilot, just a trial. A further £8 million will be made available at a later stage, and it could well be that we do extend eligibility out at that particular point. So I think we decided to just go with a small scale coastal fleet at this particular point of time because they're in the best position to install electric and hybrid engines, for example, and in the best position to provide us data and help us evaluate how successful the round could be, and how sustainability of the fleet could become as a result of the funding. So further decisions will be made as to how we progress with the funding at a later stage following the pilot. So hopefully that goes some way to answering that particular question. So that's it from me. Kate, unless you wanted to come in and say anything, we'll open for questions if anybody has any.
Nope. Okay, Matt, thanks. And thanks, Kate. Much appreciated. So right on cue, I can see Sean Douglas has joined. You're up next, Sean. We were just saying we're recording this session because there's not a massive number of representatives from industry on the call. I suspect there's been a couple of big industry meetings today, actually, and the weather's pretty good for fishing. So just bear that, just to let you know you're being recorded, and we're going to circulate this recording around our usual attendees. So over to you.
Okay, for those who don't know, I'm Sean Douglas. I'm the head of regulatory assurance for the MMO, and for my sins, I'm involved in the IVMS project from the compliance enforcement side. So I was asked just to pop in today just to give you a bit of an update on where we are, because there's quite a lot of social media traffic going on about the current situation. So where we are is last year we started the process of rolling out IVMS devices, which were completely grant funded to industry, and that was going well. And then we started to pick up some intelligence and information that some of the devices may not be compliant with our MMO type approval specs. So things such as positional quality, all that sort of stuff. So in response to that, we felt it important that we would step back and take some independent testing of the devices. So we contacted the suppliers and asked them to stop marketing and selling the devices whilst we carried out some independent testing. So the independent testing has been carried out by a university of experts to do with IVMS transmissions and satellite data, and they have done that testing, and we've now got the results, and we're starting to pick through those results with the suppliers. Whilst that was happening, we did get information that one of the suppliers was continuing to install and sell products against what we had asked them not to do. Now, there was a risk here that if they continued to sell products and the test results showed that they failed the type approval process, then they would actually be selling products that industry couldn't use, which is why we asked them to stop doing it. He hadn't stopped doing it, continued to do it, so we decided to suspend the device. So the device is currently suspended. It's not out of type approval or anything like that. It's just suspended. So it doesn't have an impact on anybody. So the devices you've currently got, whether it's Maritime Systems, Suckerfish, Fulcrum, or Satlink, are absolutely fine. You don't need to take any action. We are currently going through the test results now, assessing that with the suppliers, and if there is any impact from those, we'll be in direct communication with those affected vessels and with social media posts as well as information and stuff on the government website about what to do. We're expecting those test results to be out imminently. As with everything, there is a number of loopholes we have to jump through, but we are expecting it, if not this week, next week, but don't hold us to that. It's whilst we get everything approved and sort of signed off. So that's currently where we are. If there is any impact, if there is anything to do with the suppliers, we've got contingency plans all laid out about what to do about replacement devices. We've got contingency plans about whether, if all devices pass, getting on with the rollout, what it means, the impact that has on the SI coming into play. So we've sort of like got a number of scenarios mapped out. It's just until we get the final test results published, we're sort of stuck about where we can go with the next stages. But for the fishing industry, there's no need to take any action at the moment. There's a lot of mistruths or not accurate information going around on social media. I would probably say just ignore that. If you've got any advice, any questions, just to contact the IVMS email account and the support engagement team or the grants team, depending on what your queries are about. And then as soon as we get the test results out, a full mail shot and information will be going out to everybody. So it should have as much information in there as required.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Thanks for the update. Much appreciated. Do we have any questions for Sean before we move on IVMS? Oh, Michael, go ahead.
Hi everyone, thanks Sean. I'm Michael, I'm from the grants team within MMO, and I would just urge anybody who has any queries in relation to a grant funding application just to get in touch. I've popped the helpline number in the chat there. We're happy to help, and as Sean said, yeah, there have been some perhaps mistruths communicated, but if you've got any queries in terms of the grant funding side of things at all, please don't hesitate to pick up the phone and we can help support you through the application process. We are continuing to make grant funding payments, so as I said, just please reach out and we'll be happy to help.
Great, thanks Michael, and thanks Sean. If there aren't any questions, we'll move on. We are fairly rattling through the agenda today. So I see Mark's popped up on our screens there. Mark from Northumberland IFCA is going to talk to us about the Fisher Forums, which Northumberland IFCA have been holding around the Northumberland coast. So over to you, Mark.
Yes, thank you, Patrick. Thank you, everyone. So those of you who don't know us, I'm Mark Sutherland. I'm the Chief Officer for Northumberland IFCA. It's just really just a brief update on our Fisher Forum meetings that we've been conducting around the coast since the back end of last year. So the sort of concept behind Fisher Forums was basically built on the back of the engagement that we'd had from the HPMA consultation, especially around sort of Lindisfarne in the northern part of the district. So we basically just set out to try and have more engagement with industry. So we had a number of sort of pilot forum meetings in the northern part of the district, and then we rolled this out to sort of the main ports within the Northumberland IFCA district, but we also crossed into Eyemouth into Scotland, as we have a number of Scottish vessels that are sort of registered with shellfish permits that fish in the Northumberland IFCA district, and we'd kind of run them from, like I say, from November until the start of January. From the back of those meetings, it was clear that the industry wanted to basically have more engagement, so we decided to like sort of continue and kind of agree to do these on a sort of quarterly basis. In these sort of meetings, we talk about sort of any sort of issues from a port basis, but also any issues relating to specific fisheries, and would report on what those issues were, and then hopefully be able to feedback at the next time we're sort of met. During these meetings, we've worked with Sarah Coulthard, who was going to be here today, but unfortunately she's not able to make it. She's a social scientist, and she's basically been assisting with these Fisher Forum meetings and looking at sort of fishery management plans, especially with the crab and lobster fishery management plans, which are going to be for England. Potentially, we could have some issues in sort of that cross-border fishery. So Northumberland IFCA has been working with Newcastle University, where I don't think there's any fishers from Northumberland actually on the call today, But essentially, Sarah and another two students have been out carrying out quayside surveys, and essentially they're looking to basically interview fishers to discuss cross-border issues, but also evidence the value of fisher contributions, especially for the crab and lobster fishery management plans. And that part of the surveys is now concluded. And I think, speaking with Sarah today, I think she's interviewed over 50 fishers, which seems to be sort of fantastic number of fishermen who sort of contributed towards those surveys. Like I say, that part of the project's now concluded. It's really looking at the data and the information that's come back from those surveys, and then it's hoped that we'll be to feed these back at the next round of Fisher Forum meetings. So second round of meetings we've just concluded, and to date we've done Holy Island and Amble. Essentially we've tried drop-in sessions, but the last couple of meetings that we've had, we've actually just took the patrol boat into a port and left the boat sort of moored up for the afternoon, and sort of encouraged fishers, when they come in, to basically just pop along, have a cup of tea, have a sort of a chat, discuss any issues. Like I say, also we discuss sort of national work streams, but also any sort of NIFGA work streams that that'll be good to sort of share information about. So at the minute, we haven't got any further dates set, but these will be actually advertised on our website under, if you look in that sort of commercial fisher drop down, and we'll have the dates and the times of the next meetings once they're confirmed, as well as sort of publishing them on our sort of normal social media channels. So that's kind of it really for an update, Patrick, unless anyone's got any sort of questions.
No, thanks, Mark. Just to endorse that. I know the response that the Northumberland IFGA got to the consultation around the HPMAs was huge, and it's a really good move, I think, to try and harness that engagement, because it was a really good example of Northumberland IFGA working with the industry, wasn't it, to represent the views.
And I think for when the consultation starts for fishery management plans, and in particularly for Northumberland, it's the crab and lobster one that's going to have the greatest effects. I mean, we do know that these plans are only going to be for English waters, and potentially we've got obviously we're share border with Scotland, and that could prove to bring some challenges in with different sort of management on either side that border. So it's just, I mean, it was a way, sort of like when we first started promoting fishery management plans, how little information was known by industry, about how important these were and the need to engage in the process. So that kind of, well, basically that was one of the reasons why I want to sort of continue with this work and to carry out these surveys, which will help us inform when it's time to consult, that we've got a broad range of sort of stakeholder engagement and information that we can hopefully feed that into, as well as our own data that we hold for sort of crab and lobster stock in the district. It's hoped that this additional information will help us inform and produce a good sort of consultation response to the plans when they're out at late spring, early summer, I think is the date for it.
Absolutely. Right, thanks again, Mark. I think we've actually got through the agenda pretty quickly there. So I haven't actually got any other points on the agenda. Giles just dialed in at a key moment, right for the close of the meeting there. So I did put some time to one side for any other business, and we were going to try and canvass opinion on the format of these meetings going forward. I know there has been some discussion around I think some of the themes that have been raised in meetings previously have been quite geographically divided, if you like. So there's been sort of themes for the north and themes for the south of the 4B patch. And that's maybe a reflection of the two IFCAs in that area. And we've had some conversations around whether we hold two regional fishery group meetings in a quarter, one for the north and one for the south. We're not quite sure where that divide would be or if it's even a good idea at all. So we did want to come out to industry. It's supposed to be an industry-led group, so we did want industry to sort of feed into that decision. And I think probably what we were going to do was have sort of some voting buttons in this meeting. I think probably, unless Courtney disagrees, we'd be better doing that after the meeting through some email surveys, maybe.
I think we're going to send out an email survey instead, and it'll be a quick yes or no. Do you think we should split the groups up? And we're thinking kind of around the boundary of states at the moment as a rough indicator of which side you might land on. So yeah, we'll send that round via email after this meeting alongside the notes with a quick explanation.
Brilliant. Was there anything else for any other business, or we okay to close the meeting at that, and we'll have an hour back on our Tuesday afternoon?
I think that sounds good, especially after bank holiday.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks guys. I'll close the meeting there, and we'll send a recording of the video around our usual RFG contacts. So yeah, we'll thanks, and we'll meet again next quarter for the same again.
Thank you.
Cheers, Patrick.
Thanks.
Cheers all.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.